Welcome to Crosspointe.
Welcome to Crosspointe.
Welcome to Crosspointe.
We are an inclusive faith community
seeking to live out the loving, just, and generous way of Jesus.
We are participants in a long tradition.
It's less concerned with doctrines and dogma that demand total agreement,
but a life to be lived, enjoyed, and given away to others.
What unites us is a growing awareness that life is precious.
That we are made by love in order to love.
This community is comprised of and affirms the entire human family.
Regardless of race, age, creed,
physical abilities, marital or economic status,
gender identity, or sexual orientation.
So, if you're curious and have come to see,
if you are tired and have come to rest,
if you are grateful and have come to share,
if you are wounded and have come to heal,
if you're joyful and have come to celebrate,
if you are uprooted and have come to belong,
welcome home.
Welcome home.
Welcome home.
Welcome home.
Good morning, Crosspointe. I'm glad you joined us here online. I'm going to start the service today by singing a couple of songs, both with the theme of surrender. And the first one is a hymn that you'll probably recognize if you've been around church at any point in your life. And then the second one is an original song that we've been trying out at Crosspointe in our in-person services a couple of times. And I'll tell you more about that when we get there. But we're glad that you're with us, and wherever you are, if you're comfortable singing along, please do so. Otherwise, just enjoy listening to the songs and see if you can be present and find yourself in these songs. All to Jesus I surrender, all to Him I freely give. I will ever love and trust Him, in His presence daily live. I surrender, I surrender all. I surrender, I surrender all. All to Jesus I surrender, Lord, I give myself to Thee. Fill me with Thy love and power, let Thy blessing fall on me. I surrender, I surrender all. I surrender, I surrender all. All that I once held dear, I lay at the altar here, and all that once was my gain, I now count as loss. I surrender all. All to Jesus I surrender, humbly at His feet I bow. Worldly pleasures all forsaken, take me, Jesus, take me now. I surrender, I surrender all. I surrender, I surrender all. I surrender all. I surrender. I surrender all. This next song is a song that I wrote called Weapons of War, and it's part personal confession, and if you'll accept it, I'm also offering it as a corporate lament. Many of us at Crosspointe might call ourselves ex-evangelical, which that term means a lot of things to a lot of different people, but for the purposes of this song, I recognized as I've gotten older in myself, some motivations behind my faith and practice of Christianity that I had hidden from myself, that I wasn't taught to see, some ulterior motives that had more to do with the way that I thought God was and what God required of me. And I've just come to change those things. And I hope what is resulting is a more pure love when I'm interacting with the people that are close to me and with people in my life and with strangers, that I don't have an ulterior motive of converting someone to my brand of religion, but rather a pure love and a connection that's built on what we have in common in our humanity. And if I am inviting someone into my faith, it's more an invitation to a life that I'm enjoying rather than something, an ulterior motive with hell ultimately running in the background. And so this song is called Weapons of War, and I hope that you enjoy it. Laying down my weapons of war. I'm a servant, I'm not a soldier anymore. I'm defecting from the army of the Lord. Laying down my weapons of war. When I said I'd pray for you, I really wanted you to change. You were a notch carved in my gun, just a pawn in some sick game. All my striving to be righteous, just an attempt to shift the blame. Ooh, what a shame. I'm laying down my weapons of war. I'm a servant, I'm not a soldier anymore. Now I'm defecting from the army of the Lord. I'm laying down my weapons of war, and I will no longer make any exclusive claim on truth. Every culture and religion offers a different point of view. We are soon to be 8 billion, fingers pointing at the moon. You are me, and I am you. I'm laying down my weapons of war. I'm a servant, I'm not a soldier anymore. I'm defecting from the army of the Lord. I'm laying down my weapons of war.
Good morning, Crosspointe. I've got a few things to let you know about. On Sunday, August 25th, we're holding our annual community-wide summer block party behind Crosspointe from 10 a.m. to noon. There'll be live music, yard games, inflatables, food, and fun for all ages. This is also a great time for us to just enjoy some time together as a community. We need some help to pull this off, so if you go to crosspoint.org, you can find more information and opportunities to sign up to volunteer, donate items, and register for an open mic. Crosspointe is partnering again with the YMCA, Wake Ed, and Tools for Schools on a school supply drive for Wake County Public Schools. Tools for Schools allows educators to shop for free school supplies for their students instead of having to purchase supplies out of their own pocket. Collection bins can be found in the lobby of Crosspointe on Sunday mornings through August 25th. Middle school and high school life groups are gearing up to begin again on August 25th. Students register every year for life groups, even if they've been in a life group previously. You can find registration information for middle schoolers at crosspoint.org/MS life groups, or for high schoolers at crosspoint.org/HS life groups. If you want to partner with Crosspointe financially on all the many things that are going on in our community, there are lots of ways that you can do that. You can find out more at crosspoint.org/contribute or text crosspointenc to 77977. Thanks so much for spending some time with us today.
Hey Crosspointe, I wanted to take some time to share with you about our student ministry service trips from this summer. As a community that seeks to live out the love of Jesus in how we live, I thought you'd be encouraged to hear how our students are living that out when they're on these trips. Now, our middle school students traveled to Nashville and Memphis during the first week of July as part of our middle school service trip that we call Reroute. During that trip, our students built a fence with Tennessee state parks. They played games and they gave out snow cones during a block party for kids in Section 8 housing. They built a dream closet in an elementary school and stocked it with clothing and hygiene items for kids in need. They picked up lots of trash, almost 100 pounds worth. They sorted donations at a food bank. They served food at a men's shelter and sorted donated clothing. All the while, they had to prepare all of their own meals as a team. And I think hearing about our middle school students and their willingness to channel all of that adolescent energy to give and serve to others is a really good and beautiful thing. However, what I don't want to get lost in there is the kind of change that is happening in the midst of the doing of all of the tasks of the day. Because when you put students in close proximity with each other, with a shared desire to reflect God's heart to the community, and with the support of phenomenal adult small group leader volunteers, we get to see their hearts change. One particular story comes to mind that I want to share with you. I have an 8th grader, now a rising freshman, and this was his 3rd year on Reroute. And to be honest, when he was in 6th grade, he was a handful. He would even say that to you. He would constantly be off task when we were serving. He would be making inappropriate jokes, sometimes making fun of other people. But his life group leaders, Randy and Wolfgang, stuck with him. And this year, I cannot begin to describe the difference that I saw in him. He quickly emerged as a leader among his peers in the very best way. He would often volunteer for the most difficult job when we were serving. He was consistently a good example to his peers. He was kind and mature. He thanked me regularly for the work that I had put into creating this experience for he and his peers. And in our last team debrief session, he asked if he could say the final prayer for the group. What I can tell you is that over this time, he has come to understand what it looks like to follow Jesus with your life. And he lives that out in the very best way that a 14-year-old kid can. Now, for half of our team, this was their very first reroute trip. And as you can imagine, that comes with lots of nerves. And I was curious to see how that was going to play out when we served with People Loving Nashville. That's an organization that essentially hosts a block party of sorts every Monday night for unhoused folks in Nashville. Now, I say it's a block party in the sense that one block is closed down and all of the services for unhoused folks in Nashville are centrally available at that one time. There are portable showers and portable laundry facilities. There was a soup dinner available with bottled water. Folks can get clean clothing and a fresh haircut, but our job was to just interact with the community. So we divided up in groups of 3 students to 1 adult to go socialize. Now, the gaps in life experience in this context are pretty broad. So I frankly thought that our students would struggle to have any sort of connected conversations. However, I can tell you that there are times when I'm glad to be wrong, and this was one of them. Numerous students boldly walked right up and started to have honest, friendly conversations with members of the community. Some of them chatted for more than an hour and a half with just one person. And in our team debrief, many of our students reflected on how much we all just want someone to take an interest in us. We all want to feel seen. And if that is not God's kingdom at work, I don't know what is. Now, for our high school students, they traveled to Purdy, Missouri, which is a tiny town about an hour from Branson, to serve at Camp Barnabas, which is a camp for kids with special needs. The week that we served there, our students were working with campers with intellectual disabilities and or autism, and those campers ranged from 7 to 18 years old. Each of our students were assigned to a cabin with about 10 total volunteers and 7 to 10 campers. Some of those campers were fairly independent, while others needed assistance with bathing or using the restroom or eating. I give lots of credit to Camp Barnabas for their training efforts in talking with us about how to do those things with your camper in a way that is dignified and honoring of their humanity with all appropriate safety protocols in place. Nonetheless, you can imagine that this was a steep learning curve for our students. Our students were with their campers 23 hours a day. Now, apart from caring for younger siblings or babysitting for a few hours, most of our students had never had to provide round-the-clock caregiving for another person. And this comes with lots of rapid emotional growth as our students started to realize all that goes into navigating caregiving, while also honoring a person's ability to make their own choices. In the beginning, in our 1-hour break together as a team, there were lots of tears due to feeling overwhelmed and wondering if we were up to this task. We had one camper in my cabin, for example, that really struggled to make transitions. Sometimes she would go to the bathroom and just refuse to get off the toilet for more than an hour at a time, despite every motivational tactic to help her transition. And this would happen multiple times a day. And as you can imagine, this is pretty frustrating. But our students stuck with her, and she dug deep and continued to encourage her to make the transition. We had other students in our team that had campers that were nonverbal and prone to running off, so they spent large portions of their week just trying to keep up with their camper and make sure that they were safe. We had some students that had to help multiple campers shower and use the restroom every single day. Now, I know many parents listening to this are very familiar with this level of sacrifice and caregiving. But when you are 15 and you have to make the leap to this level of caregiving literally overnight, it's pretty tough. And so what I would share is that we struggled at first, but again, I saw such growth in our students. They were honored to get to know their camper and to be able to help care for them. One student even said, I realize now that when my parents are telling me to do stuff, that they aren't trying to control me. They are trying to help because I'm just trying to help my camper and they think I am trying to control them. That's a good piece of wisdom, right? So many of our students said that they would happily return to Camp Barnabas. They loved being able to care for someone in a way where they knew that what they were doing mattered. They understood that their willingness to serve is what makes summer camp possible. I think that they learned that sometimes loving people, serving people is hard. Sometimes it's real hard. And also that loving and serving others also brings us a sense of deep joy and purpose that is hard to describe or explain. Last, I'll say that our students stood out among other volunteers because they are infused with joy. You can tell that their faith, our faith, is not about rigid rule following and just trying to dodge shame. It's more like, what if we just go all in on this love, grace, joy thing? What if we just show up with a willing heart and see what God does? They dive all the way in with big hearts, and it is palpable. So when we talk about what we're doing in student ministry, what it looks like to be a student that grows up at Crosspointe or to be a volunteer in student ministry, that is the invitation. What if we just took your wild, growing teenage self and we went all the way in on this thing and just got curious about what God might do? For me, it is an honor to bear witness to all that God is doing through these students and through this community.
Hi everybody. Let's just jump right in. We're gonna start with Genesis chapter 3, the very first humans and the forbidden fruit, that whole iconic scene that unfolds. It reads like this: the woman took its fruit, the forbidden fruit, and ate, and she also gave some to her husband who was with her, and he ate. Then the eyes of both of them were opened, and they knew that they were naked, and they sewed fig leaves together and made loincloths for themselves. They heard the sound of the Lord God walking in the garden at the time of the evening breeze, and the man and his wife hid themselves from the presence of the Lord God among the trees of the garden. But the Lord God called to the man and said to him, "Where are you?" And he said, "Well, I heard the sound of you in the garden, and I was afraid because I was naked and I hid myself." And God said, "Who told you you were naked? We don't have that word yet. Have you eaten from the tree of which I commanded you not to eat?" And the man said, "The woman whom you gave to be with me, she gave me fruit of the tree, from the tree, and I ate." And then the Lord God said to the woman, "What is this that you have done?" The woman said, "The serpent tricked me, and I ate." So the Lord God said to the serpent, "Because you have done this, cursed are you among all animals and among all wild creatures. Upon your belly you shall go, and dust you shall eat all the days of your life. I will put enmity or antagonism between you and the woman, and between your offspring and hers. He will strike your head, and you will strike his heel." And to the woman God said, "I will make your pangs in childbirth exceedingly great. In pain you shall bring forth children. Yet your desire shall be for your husband, and he shall rule over you." Okay, so quick side note. This doesn't even have to do with the message today, but it's important. Little tangent here. Notice that the snake has been cursed, and later we'll see the land is cursed, but not people. This is an explanation. Like somebody asked one time, why do snakes slither? Why don't they walk? And this is the explanation given for when snakes started slithering. It's also an explanation on why childbirth is so painful. And it's also a reason for how come it always seems like men rule over women. So if you feel a duty to live your life as informed by the narratives of the Bible, the reason for patriarchy is because everything broke. It's not how it's supposed to be. So if you are okay with a woman addressing the pain of childbirth with an epidural or whatever else, then you should be equally okay with remedying the other thing that went wrong, and make sure that women are leading in every facet of human existence that men are able to lead in, ensuring patriarchy is brought down in the same way that you would want to reduce pain in childbirth. All right? Okay, so back to Genesis 3, and God said to the man, "Because you have listened to the voice of your wife and have eaten of the tree about which I commanded you, you shall not eat of it. Cursed is the ground because of you. In toil you shall eat of it all the days of your life. Thorns and thistles it shall bring forth for you, and you shall eat the plants of the field. Can't go pick off a tree anymore. You're going to eat from agriculture. It's going to take work. And the Lord God made garments of skins for the man and for his wife and clothed them. So, notice Adam and Eve, they don't cop to anything. They won't admit anything. They feel this shame and fear all of a sudden, this inadequacy and the sense of threat, this uneasy feeling. Shame and fear are guiding all their decisions, so they don't admit anything. They defend themselves. It wasn't my fault. It was the woman that you put here, God. And the woman's like, well, it wasn't me, it was the snake. The only being not defending themselves here is the snake, the serpent. And so there is an implication here, like how much different would the whole rest of the Bible be if they had just confessed, we did that, trusting that God was forgiving or something, and taken responsibility. I think the Bible would be really short. But instead, this first couple are blaming God. They're blaming each other, blaming God. God becomes someone to hide from. The land is defending itself now. There's thorns and thistles. People have to wear layers of skins to hide in and be protected by. And by the way, it's ironic we call those animal hides. This story sets out to answer a question that we all ask in our own ways. Why does it seem like life has so much antagonism or friction baked into it all the time? You can almost imagine elders a long time ago sitting around a campfire telling children, and at this point they'd say, this is when everything got dangerous. Or we could frame it this way. Genesis 3, the third chapter of Genesis, is saying there's now a reason to be on your guard, to keep a lookout, keep watch, speak softly but carry a big stick. No matter what you're doing, how benign or innocent, terrible things could jump out at you. This is, according to the old story, when everybody and everything became something to defend yourself from. And I think that's worth reflecting on for just a second. We are just starting the third chapter of a book that will have about 1,200 chapters in it. And already the world should no longer be thought of as safe or inherently peaceful. Defensiveness, which is the opposite of peace, is now the appropriate posture for anybody that wants to be alive. Because there's danger in the world. There's danger in the shrubs. Not just between people and their ideas and opinions, but it's down in the plants. I don't know how much attention you've paid to the leaves of a holly bush, and there's some stuff about this on Facebook I notice right now too. The classic Christmas tree shape. I'm not sure if that's in focus. It's got the little prickly points on it. But you may have also seen holly leaves that are smooth on the edges. And you may have noticed that these same two leaves can come from the same plant. I picked these about 3 inches apart from each other, same bush. And the reason has to do with something happening in the DNA. It's a reaction to something happening in its environment. The smooth-edged leaf, that's the default. This is what's in the genes. But herbivores chew off the leaves, or a landscaper lops the edges off. And there's this little note that gets added to the DNA. It doesn't change the genetic code. The plant is not being fundamentally changed, but the genes are expressed differently. We're talking about epigenetics. There's a shift in the expression of the genes, and it results in this leaf becoming this leaf. So it's supposed to deter herbivores, but unfortunately for the plant, that doesn't have any deterring effect on landscapers. So when you see these sharp leaves on a holly plant, you are seeing a plant declaring, I will not be hurt again. And if you try, I will hurt you. In the name of its own survival, it has become very defensive. Because holly leaves don't know the difference between constructive pruning that helps them grow and deer attacks. They don't know the difference between being required to honor a boundary and an herbivore. Everything that doesn't do what it wants, it has to be stabbed back, because holly plants don't know any better, but you and I do. We can know the difference between being attacked, mistreated, persecuted, or being disagreed with, corrected, confronted for an intentional or unintentional problem we've caused, having our preferences denied, being presented with an uncomfortable but necessary opportunity to change. We can know the differences between those things. And the irony is, it's super difficult to see it and recognize it when we're defensive. To see it coming from in here within me, to recognize it as no, it's not coming from out there. This is coming from inside myself and affecting out there, my relationships with other people. That's the very thing defensiveness works so hard to prevent me from seeing, prevent anybody from seeing. And I'm with you on this. I for years was only barely able to see this in myself for a long time. There was this woman who came up after a message, super incredible human being, internationally renowned leader. And she came up to me and she led with, hey, I have a bit of a problem with something you said in your message. And I was on it. Like right away, my tongue took this shape. And I interrupted and said, well, wait, was there anything that you liked? I mean, just right away went into, well, first of all, I don't think I've ever been asked a question in such a horrible manner. I couldn't hear it. I wouldn't let her say it. But in more recent years, thinking that I've grown and matured, I've begun to see how sneaky this is inside me. Somebody close to me recently told me they don't think I actually hear them very often because I so often get defensive first. And I said, I'm not defensive. I'm disagreeing with what you're saying I did. And then later I imagined a defense attorney saying, I'm not defending my client. I'm simply putting all my resources into proving he's innocent. And I thought, well, crap. Because sometimes an insistence that things concerning me be correctly understood is defensiveness disguised as truth, keeping the facts straight. And a big part of that for us, at least in this context, is that we have taught ourselves to rebrand a lot of our defensiveness as a virtue. How many times have we heard Jesus people get together and then break their huddle and declare to the rest of us that they're going to, make the world give back something. We're going to take back this or that. We're going to take the country back for God. We're going to take schools back. We're going to put prayer back. Who took prayer out? We're going to put it back. We're going to take back Christmas and the true meaning. Like, well, who took it? Who's doing this to you? Well, they did. They did these things to us, our defenseless, vulnerable Jesus. They did that to him. So we're going to defend what's ours. There are entire international ministries whose reason for existing is, the way they put it, defending the Bible from the beginning, from Genesis, for people who don't think it's a scientifically accurate description of how we got here. Entire church ministries, organizations, websites, radio shows, their mission statements are things like defending the Word of God, defending the faith, defending Christianity. From who? A lot of this is called apologetics. That comes from a Greek word that's actually in the Bible, apologia. And it means defense or justification. Because in the New Testament days, the word was describing someone explaining themselves in the face of those persecuting them, imprisoning, beating, abusing them for their beliefs. So they would justify their existence to these people. They would explain what they believe, who they are, and they're doing so to a power that finds them unacceptable. But then after some time, it started to be used as a term to describe pushing back on intellectual attacks, which aren't, generally speaking, attacks. That's just the word we use, isn't it? It's not an attack as much as it's a disagreement, remaining unconvinced, a correction, remaining unwilling to revere what I think everybody should revere. Well, that's not an attack. But it feels like something's happening to me, to my team, my identity, and that something feels like a threat, and it triggers a self-protection instinct. And so I have to grow these sharp intellectual spikes, or I'm going to be chewed up and destroyed. It's interesting to observe that in the New Testament, probably most of the entire Bible, it is an underdog's account. It's written in many ways, not by the victors like the rest of history is, but it's bottom up. It punches up a lot. And so when we, in the United States of America, are reading the Bible, as citizens of probably the most powerful nation in history, the largest economy, the largest influencer on earth, we're going to have to recalibrate our heads a little bit to connect to the spirit of the writings and the original audience, aren't we? And so an impulse we have is to find a way to frame ourselves as underdogs so that we can be part of the story a little more obviously. Maybe I'm oppressed and pushed around. That's an instinct we have. I've had it. It's one of the reasons we hear people so loudly proclaiming on their bumper stickers or online or in person with a sign, I am not ashamed. Okay, no one asked you to be. I take a stand for Jesus, for the truth. I will not compromise. Great, no one's asking you to do that. And some of that stuff might have some legitimacy to it. I mean that, depending on what's behind it. But so much of it, probably most of it, is a portrayal of itself as needing to punch up against the forces that hate us and our Jesus. It's a mindset that's trying to grab on to the level of the underdog, the reject, the marginal. But for most, and maybe all American Christians, that's just fiction. American Christians, we're not persecuted here. We're made fun of, we're dismissed and disagreed with and ignored and corrected. Yep, that's happening all the time. But we don't experience persecution or even marginalization here. Our presidents profess their Christianity, and that's a positive. You can't even get nominated if you're another religion than Christianity in this nation. Our leaders swear their oaths on our holy book. Our government buildings have our scriptures chiseled into their faces. Our federal holidays and religious calendars line right up. Our money, our Pledge of Allegiance, stuff like that. I mean, it at least loosely canonizes our faith. It certainly doesn't reject or renounce it. We could hardly understand the underdoggedness of the first Christians. I mean, the average Christian now, you and I, we look far more like a converted Roman centurion than those first dislocated, oppressed members of the peasant revolution that Jesus was leading in the Gospels. But without that sense of being in that other group, whose kingdom is not of this earth, it's so hard to find our place in it. So hard to recognize that we're participants in it. So many of us, we enter into a defense posture because that makes us feel like true believers. The world just doesn't understand us. So when the opening ceremony of the Olympics depicts whatever it was depicting, an Italian painting of the Last Supper, something Greek or whatever it was, there's an impulse, and it feels like a duty for some of us to be offended because we have to believe they are offending us again. They oppress and belittle us and our God. And so we're going to take a stand and we're going to push back, blah, 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 blah. And Dallas Willard's quote has been circulating in reaction to all this. He once said, "I think a mature Christian is someone who's very hard to offend." And I think he's right. I would add that maybe Jesus would put it this way. If someone parodies you on the one painting, offer to them the other painting as well. If we don't recognize how so many of us are stuck in these defense postures, claiming to ourselves that the world or others are trying to corner us, then we're not going to realize why oftentimes we just don't have much of a message of wisdom or peace to offer. Which, if I might offer another side note, here's another tangent. Maybe during Christmas we should rethink which holly leaves we're using in our holly leaf imagery. Since we're saying peace on earth and all that, right? So we should be using the smooth edge leaf, I would say, unless we're just admitting with our continued use of the sharp edge one that we're not there yet, but we're working on it. The shame and fear in the garden, it collapses everything into defensiveness, but a lot of us learn that defensiveness is also the solution. Most of us have been brought up in this faith understanding defensiveness toward the world and other people's conclusions and beliefs and misunderstandings. Well, that's how we prove that we're serious about God working through us to proclaim the good news. And in fact, if you don't present this defensiveness, and I'm saying defensiveness and I'm now bleeding thanks to this leaf. Good job, defensive little leaf. If we don't present ourselves this defensive way, well, many Christians will say that means we're not serious. We're joining the way of the world, backsliding and conforming to cultural pressures rather than standing up for the truth. So I'll be honest and as accurate as I'm able to be about this. Churches that operate this defensive way, us against the world, us and God against everybody else, our programming and our ministries and our sermons and our theology in competition with all of them, they're against us, but we're going to push back. They generally have far more engaged people in their churches than churches like Crosspointe do. I mean, trying as we have at Crosspointe, however imperfectly and inconsistently, and it has been, trying to be a community who doesn't operate in that defense posture about people and their different beliefs and all of that stuff, not all of the us versus them stuff, it is way harder. Because it's harder to rally troops when you're saying we're not troops. We're not going to war. This is a commitment to awaken ourselves and our own souls and to stop meddling and forcing other people's souls to come to the same conclusions. Most of us, myself included, have a very difficult time, at least initially, understanding the value of a movement or the point of an effort if there's no them against which we strain so that we can define us. It's like being a weightlifter in zero gravity. How would I get bigger and stronger without something working against me? How can a river have a shape and a flow without the banks saying no to it on both sides. You can't come out into the land. It's hard to find a self without a them that forces you into a meaningful form. We feel like we need a them, a persecutor, an oppressor, a villain, an oppressive force to protect ourselves from, or we can't not easily understand the meaning of ourselves. But all of this happens, just as the very first stories about the human beings explains in Genesis, at the expense of peace. And so I want to shift the focus from the grander societal scale to how this affects our relating to one another. If it's not clear, let's make sure we're clear. When you personally believe that you're in danger, that your life or interests are being threatened, it's totally right to be defensive. Defensiveness is the right response to danger. I would, of course, defend myself and my family, and probably you, from that which sought to harm us. But most of us, most of the time, are not in those situations. Our defensiveness is a state of mind. We have internalized this state, this role, because we've observed it so much in our nation, our family, the culture, our faith for years and years. It's not actually a reaction to what's happening necessarily. It's a role that we automatically step into. It's a story we tell ourselves and a role we play in that story. And so as a result, we get trapped in these cycles of tension, misunderstanding, frustration, lost peace, but we're completely confused. Like, why is this happening? How can this be? Because we're really trying to improve things, genuinely trying, but they're so often not improving. How can that be? Well, one way to understand this is to see the three roles that we step into almost automatically, and we move in and through all of them. And I'm risking oversimplifying and being a little reductive here, but we're often, without seeing ourselves do it, we're assuming roles as an oppressed person, an oppressive person, and then a rescuing or helpful person. And all of these are defense postures. I'm protecting myself in either one of these from being found useless or bad, or having to take risks where I can prove that I make mistakes. You can see all three of these like in an interaction with children. Inside of a minute, you can see it. The little girl is being the helper. She's teaching the younger neighbor boy to learn to ride his bike because that makes her feel like she has value, that others need her. She needs people to need her for her to feel valuable. But the little boy doesn't want to be helped because he feels babied, and so he lashes out at her unsolicited help, to which our little hero responds by shifting into an angry persecutor. She's furious, it's insulting. So she shifts and she pushes the little boy into the grass and she says, I hope you never had to learn how to ride a bike, you little jerk, or whatever. But mom and dad saw the whole thing. So they shout her name, her full name. They use the middle name, they're angry. So in a flash, now she shifts into like a victim. She's oppressed. I was just trying to help, and he yelled at me, and he was mean. I didn't do anything. Why am I always the one getting in trouble? You can see how she moved from helper to persecutor to persecuted. She doesn't have to admit to anything or take any responsibility. And parents can move through these roles too. The helper role is what a parent is. I need to be needed if I'm going to be a parent. And the kids they grow up, they become independent, and a sadness starts to creep in because we're realizing we accidentally formed an identity out of being a parent and a helper. Now who am I? And so we are oppressed. You never call. I guess you don't love me anymore. Where did I go wrong? I guess I'm not cool anymore. But then we can shift into oppressor. After all I've done, you're going to do that? How dare you? I raised you better than this. You're being entitled. You didn't learn that from me. Blah, blah, blah. You're off the family phone plan. Or joking aside, something far worse, it happens. The helper becomes oppressed, becomes oppressor, will soon return to oppressed. We see that all the time. And our parents, it's harder to see in us as parents. In our relationships with our partners, our spouses, it's uncomfortable to recognize how we just cannot or will not receive feedback, complaints, criticisms, corrections, because we are stuck in these roles, stuck maybe in the oppressed victim role. There are real victims out there. Remember, this isn't what's actually happening. You would never say this to an actual victim of mistreatment. It's a state of mind. It's a role that you're electing. And some of us, we're stuck in that oppressed role. We can't handle finding out we've done something wrong. Again, I'm always wrong. I never do right. It's never enough. No one likes me, not even my partner. We keep ourselves oppressed and persecuted because that shields us from having to change or have to take risks where we could fail, and then, gosh, then the cat would really be out of the bag. Or we shield ourselves by becoming the helper, the fixer, the rescuer. I'm going to keep my stuff out of focus, but we're going to keep your needs and maybe your neediness center stage. I'm defending myself from feeling useless or unloved by making myself necessary to you. But see, then we're going to have to lash out because sooner or later they don't accept our help. They didn't do what we advised. They told us to back off. And they're biting at our insecurities about not being enough in the first place. So yeah, the defensiveness becomes a counteroffensive when we become sort of a persecutor. We blame all that blame, those bad feelings. They have to go somewhere, and I'm not going to hold them, and so we pass them off. Oppressed becomes savior, becomes oppressor, round and round and round. We're picking these roles, and we don't know that we're doing it. Let's explode this back out for a second to the larger scale. We see a lot of this in a lot of evangelical Christianity, these three roles. The morally marginalized underdog who's trying in this dark, shadowy, terrible world to tell other people how to live, how to believe, how to love, how to do everything. We're just trying to help. And we're doing it out of love. And then when people reject them and their beliefs and their values, well, then they lash out and declare, well, it's because the world's lost and evil and crazy. But then people push back on those judgmental attitudes, and then they're back to oppressed. And gosh, we live at the mercy of these God haters, these truth deniers, wicked, immoral heathens. I just wish Jesus would come back and rescue us because it's just so bad for us here. And we see it not only in this population, we see it in lots of powerful populations. We see it, all three of these roles played by people in leadership. And their state of mind gets mimicked by their supporters, their followers. This happens at the large scale because it's simply a multiplication of what individuals are doing and how they see themselves. So we work at the level of the individual, and we have to do it compassionately because it's not in itself evil. It's annoying and it causes all kinds of problems, but defensiveness is simply it's a human impulse to survive. It's just been steered completely off the rails. It's nature. That's how we can be defensive on autopilot because it's natural to defend yourself. So we can't shame or judge away nature, but we can learn to see how unnecessary it is most of the time, how it causes far more problems than it's pretending to solve. So let's admit to ourselves the defensive feelings you and I have, those are real. When you're feeling like, gosh, I can't get it right. I feel like I'm just failing all the time. That's a real feeling, even though it's a role we're playing. We just have to remember that strong, real feelings, that's data, not directions. As we try to grow here, it doesn't do us any good to identify these habits and then try to shame them because it's probably part of us that's simply trying to get needs met from all the way back in the day when we were kids, like everything else is. We've got some unmet needs. It's just now we're trying to do it in the present, that the timing and the place are completely off. And that's real, that's valid, and it's worth being gentle about, even as we recognize it's causing all kinds of problems that have to be addressed. So as we recognize them, we can consciously choose to not play these roles. But this is tricky because sometimes you'll be 30 minutes into a conflict before you see it. You might be 2 days past it. And you're not going to want to admit it because you feel like you're losing, and defensiveness doesn't want to lose. But you pause and you gently, honestly admit, I was in a defense posture. I am in a defense posture. I'm playing one or more of these roles to protect myself from shame and fear. And then you see if you can step out of the role right then and there. And one way to tell that you're stepping out of the role successfully is you're going to get a really strange, uncomfortable feeling at first because you're going to feel vulnerable and you'll feel strong. It'll feel really weird. You'll feel stupid. You'll feel like you lost, but you're going to feel strong because you're back in the garden, naked but home. So I've given you the three roles our defensiveness plays during a conflict or multiple conflicts. Let me offer you a few more things to think about as we try to wake up to defensiveness, taking away our peace, causing all these problems between us, okay? So it's hard work because our defensive habits are already they're already there because we want so badly to be right in the world. So learning to develop ourselves underneath that, I just want to tell you, it's slow going, but it's worth it. And we're in this together because our ability to have and radiate love and peace, that's directly tied to our ability to get our energies correctly pointed, not completely away from ourselves, but away from ourselves so it can flow between us and others. So here's a few things. One, recognize that defending ourselves very often takes the form of trying to control others. If you have to put disclaimers on everything before you say what you actually mean or feel, or you spend time learning things, not for the knowledge, but you're loading a weapon, you want to prove you know what you're talking about, or you withhold the truth or information until you can be sure that it's going to be taken the right way, or you may not even share it at all, or you even tell people how to feel around you, don't cry, don't be mad, don't freak out. Calm down. Those kinds of things, that's often preemptive defensiveness, being defensive ahead of time. That's working hard to control people's feelings about you so that they can't arrive at any bad conclusions about you. And watch that, because it traps you in a state of trying to control, to puppeteer people so that they can't feel badly about you, can't feel badly in front of you, and people can feel you doing that. Even if they don't know how to describe it, they don't have the vocabulary for it, they can feel that manipulation, and after a while it wears them out. And it will wear you out too, because that's not relating to them, that's being vigilant. How do I know this? Well, because if I am not thoughtful, I often slip right into this. I get fixated on others coming to a favorable opinion of what I'm doing or saying. It's me, because I've gone back on autopilot, pumping relational energy, not into trust and mutuality, but into how things are going to go for me. How are you going to see me, and how's that going to work for me? It's really hard to be at peace and to be loving and connected to people and to hear them when defensiveness is demanding that I stay ahead of you with a good offense. I mean, that's a good war strategy, but terrible for love. So watch for that and stand down from it as you see it. Another thing, and we come back to this so often, it's probably almost hourly at this point. Remember the importance of acceptance. Defensiveness is causing you problems, but only because you and I felt that we had to defend ourselves here and there in the past. So it's not only natural, but we got something out of it at one point. But we just never learned or got enough clarity on when it's actually necessary. So it's become an instinct, a reflex. And so we overplay it, and it's causing pain rather than helping us to avoid it. But accepting that defensiveness, this is part of my style of relating, and I can't shame it away, so I'm going to accept it, that I've just been trying to find a way forward. A note about this that I've shared before: accepting it will take the form of admitting it in front of the people you're defensive with. That's tricky to do, but man, is it helpful. So a phrase I've shared before: when I feel the leaves getting sharp around the edges, when I feel myself stepping into one of the dramatic roles, here we go, I'm going to be criticized again, and then how am I going to get to one of the other parts? When I notice that, I say out loud, and I haven't done this a ton, but I say it in my head a lot. If you say it out loud, it's super helpful. Hang on a second. This is where I usually get defensive. And then take a beat and return to the openness. Go back to the garden, naked and unafraid. You might still find something needs to be corrected. I'm going to have to reject that or something, but you're not doing it from autopilot anymore. You're not doing it in that victim state of mind, that defensive, self-protecting posture. But you're doing it clear-headed and sober. So acceptance of self is the key to acceptance of other people. And I know so many of us, we want to grow in that. And so it's growing and accepting. I'm defensive because it's an old habit I used to get some mileage out of, but now I'm not. doing that is what helps us become more understanding and accepting of other people. So, and that's going to turn other people's defensiveness down as well. You being accepting of them helps them turn their protective energy down. Lastly, and this is so connected to 1 and 2, it's probably not a third point, probably an extension of 1 and 2. I want to challenge you to open yourself to seeing that often when you're defensive, what you are defending in that moment, protecting, creating conflict for, is a character, not really you. There's this ideal person that you have for years been curating, this person who's more respectable and lovable than you currently are, more sought after, more memorable, more enviable, successful. That person is going to achieve so many things. That person is going to be someone you're proud of. And you keep building them. They're out there in the future. It's a character who will exceed the expectations of family and former classmates and your ex. And someday you will be this character. You're still building them. Now, who you are actually in real life is often frustratingly short of this someday character. And so maybe you think who you actually are right now, at this point, I mean, you talk too much. You do cringy things. You're forgetful. You haven't gotten around to some stuff. You haven't achieved, blah, 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 blah. But someday I'll be that person. Someday I'll leave a party and not feel weird about it. Next year, by the next reunion, when I get the new job, I'll be a different, better character. You know what? I could move to a new city and give the new character a whole fresh start with a new audience. This character takes up a lot of emotional energy. So when your spouse points out that you forgot to pack the kids' lunch, or your coworker says in front of everybody that we would have gotten the project finished, but your reporting had errors in it that still aren't corrected. Or your fiance says your joke hurt his feelings. Or your friend says that they don't want your help. Or your kids say, well, the reason I didn't tell you that thing is because you always overreact. Well, that doesn't match the character I've been curating. I don't want to be that guy. I'm not that kind of person. And we're getting defensive because we're defending a character, a fiction. And I want you to know that this person is good and perfect and never wrong or disappointing or weak, because that character is a distraction. It's supposed to distract me and everybody else from the real person I won't accept. And so I just want to remind you, childish as it might sound, God doesn't love you or a character. They don't exist. But God loves you. Do I have to say it just the way you are, just as I am? You are a beautiful, complex, unique gift and a buffoon and a beloved child of God. So when you get things wrong, that's simply a reminder that perfect doesn't mean flawless, but you're perfect. You are a perfect you. I mean, say your name and then is perfect. Yeah, you're exactly who you're supposed to be, or you'd be somebody else. When you defend yourself, be mindful that you might be defending this ideal that you're never going to reach. You're not going to be less cringy next year. You're just not going to be. You're demanding that people believe in a character that doesn't exist, a story that you believe is worth more love and respect than you are. And you're getting angry, you're getting hurt because you are being shown in front of the dishwasher, in front of the in-laws, in front of the rest of the class or the staff, that no one sees your character but you. They just see the person who makes mistakes. You, who forgets and is wrong or ignorant about most things on earth, and you hurt people on accident and sometimes on purpose. And you're so wonderful and you're so capable of things in one space, and you really blew it over in this other space. Well, welcome to the species, you. Please find relief in knowing we don't believe in your character, and I'm asking you not to believe in mine, so we can stop demanding other people enter into conflict on its behalf. My dear friends, there's so much more to say on this, and we'll come back to it. But for now, I hope you'd feel invited to grow your leaves a little more smoothly on the edges, knowing you're going to be bitten, you're going to be pruned, and I hope you can tell the difference. And that you'll allow it, and that you'll be at peace anyway, that you would listen more than you demand to be heard, that you would understand more than you demand to be properly understood, that you would apologize far more than you would explain away, that you would entertain no longer blaming God, yourself, others, snakes for what's happening, and just accept that life has a whole bunch of thorns in it. Even if you're flawless, you're going to catch some thorns. And I pray you and I would be the kind of presence in the world for others where being defensive around us just wouldn't even seem necessary. May we accept love and give it freely. Amen.
If you would like to know more or get connected to Crosspointe, go to crosspointenc.org. If you're in need of care or assistance, go to crosspointe.org/care. And welcome home.